When No Second Prances came out, there was an awful lot of buzz surrounding a scene toward the end where Trixie fires herself from a cannon into the mouth of an angry manticore. Many saw it as Trixie attempting suicide, because apparently seeing connections to depression and self-harm is reading too much into things, but suicide makes total sense. Considering that kind of cognitive dissonance, I was about ready to write this fan theory off as more injecting Wooby into Trixie's character. And then this happened.
Does a penitent Trixie try to take her own life out of despair? After all, I saw Thanks for the Memories as an example of the grieving process, so I understand how people would view this episode as a lens. However, Thanks for the Memories featured each stage of the grieving process, whereas Trixie doesn't appear to display the warning signs. It's happening much too quickly. I view this as Trixie following through with an attitude of, the show must go on.
Suddenly, this theory gains a lot more credibility. Okay, so you're probably wondering how the best reviewer in town saying that this couldn't be suicide makes the theory more valid. That's some pretty twisted logic even from my hipster brain. Well, let's focus on the quote that stuck out, shall we?
However, Thanks for the Memories featured each stage of the grieving process, whereas Trixie doesn't appear to display the warning signs.
Now, if you have any experience with suicide or suicidal people, you will know one fact about suicide. There are no warning signs. Many suicides, in fact a vast majority of them, come out of the blue to the people close to the person who died. The vast majority of people who take their own life do so impulsively, with the decision to do it being made just minutes or hours before the act. In cases where it is premeditated, suicidal people often do their best to hide any signals they might possibly give because they don't want to be stopped. They read the same freaking pamphlets that you did, so they know what not to do if they don't want to be found out. Giving away prized possessions or talking about how you'd be better off dead are pretty big red flags for suicide, which is why suicidal people don't actually do it most of the time. So yeah, I think there is some credibility to the theory that Trixie might have attempted suicide. It's actually extremely realistic to real-world suicides, and there was always a precedent for it. However, it's probably not actually what happened because this is My Little Pony and the writers would have been fired if they had actually intended to pull that stunt. If we're not allowed to confirm that Applejack's parents are actually dead in-universe, or that talking about the grieving process has to be hidden under hibernation, I don't think an on-screen attempt at suicide would have made it to the screen. But that does highlight a bigger problem. Trixie is an awful character. Despite all my sympathy for her, Trixie has never been a well-written character. She was clumsily written to suit a particularly shallow lesson, and has barely evolved beyond that since. She appeared in 2 episodes doing the exact same thing she did in the first, and in the Equestria Girls movies is relegated to being a hollow shout-out to the fans, similar to Princess Luna. Unfortunately, the Brony fandom of Season 1 was latching onto pretty much every character they could so much as set their eyes on as being a new milestone for the fandom. Spot an animation error? New mascot. See a cutie mark that looks kind of like a BBC series if you squint a bit and take some hallucinogenics? New favorite character. This pony sitting kinda weird? Right, pages upon pages of headcanons of her being absolutely obsessed with humans. Once Season 4 hit, the fandom actually stopped doing this because we started getting new characters introduced as supporting roles in their own episodes, so much of the fandom's love for new characters went to characters that actually deserved it. Trixie was a weird amalgamation of both of these. She was a supporting character in her debut episode, like Sassy Saddles or Miss Pamel, but was never afforded the same level of detail or really anything interesting beyond she brags a lot. She was introduced entirely to be the shoehorned villain for a very shallow lesson that aged like milk and probably should have never been made. Despite Trixie being something of a breakout character, the episode she debuted in was almost universally despised. Trixie does manage to steal the show by putting a group of would-be hecklers in their place, who only started heckling her because they think she's a touch too arrogant. So Trixie wasn't exactly rolling a double six to begin with, and seems to only still be a fan favorite on the basis of she was once, so she must always be. Pretty much the minute Season 2 rolled around, Trixie was instantly outclassed by Discord, who swooped in, stole everyone's heart with a wonderful performance, and then swooped out again until Season 3. And then outclassed again by Queen Chrysalis, who did the exact same thing, and then Sunset Shimmer, who did the exact same thing. In fact, it'd be faster to name major characters that haven't outclassed Trixie. She spends most of her time trying to occupy a space that's already occupied by Discord, who has so far managed to avoid being pigeonholed into just being a stale fandom shoutout the way Trixie and Princess Luna have. When Discord shows up for an episode, it's an event. It's going to be fun, maybe provide some insight on Discord as a character, but for the most part he exists to throw a wrench into the main 6, even now that he's been tamed by Fluttershy. And Trixie has the potential to be the same thing. In fact, I'd argue that Trixie would have been a better candidate as a friendship student than Starlight, if only for the fact that Trixie doesn't come with all that uncomfortable terrorism baggage, and that despite all of her failings as a character, it's at least fun when she shows up. Trixie has always been about as cynical as fan pandering can get, but she's never been boring. That's really what makes me so disappointed about things like the way Trixie and Luna are handled, or Starlight's awful redemption arc or the shallow and meaningless lessons, because DHX has demonstrated constantly that they're good at all of these things. It's not incompetence that causes these issues, it's pure and simple laziness, and they mask that laziness behind things that will get them applause regardless of how bad they are at it. As I mentioned before, I think the fundamental flaw with Trixie comes down to the fact that she was created to teach a lesson that never should have been taught in the first place, namely that arrogance in and of itself is not only a worthwhile criticism, but an inherent personality flaw at all times. As a YouTuber, I get called arrogant as an insult a lot. Primarily because of one reason. When I express an opinion on anything, not only am I confident that my opinion is right, but I don't then turn around and start kissing the ass of anybody who might have a dissenting opinion. A lot of YouTubers do kiss the ass of anybody who might have a dissenting opinion out of a real fear that if you don't, then they're going to start rampaging through your comments and ratings and screaming up made-up criticisms about how you're treating your opinion as if it's fact. And as someone who deals with tens of thousands of people regularly, I can see that there's a lot of truth in that statement. But I'm of the opinion that those people will complain about something anyway, and waffling an obvious statement to everybody to try and appease those weebles who genuinely can't handle having their opinions challenged and who go into blind rages when it is a complete waste of time. And I've actually begun to have a great deal of disdain for YouTubers who still do it because they aren't calming anybody down, and worse, they're creating an environment where people expect to have their ass kissed because they do something as meaningless and effortless as disagree with someone. Look, if that's you, if you really do genuinely get angry because you think I'm treating my opinion as if it's fact, oh well, you'll get over it one of these days. Thank God for me.